Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you here today. So for today's panel, I want to invite all of us here to ask ourselves one question. It's a simple one, yet one with enormous consequences. What does AI owe children? Because the decisions we make today will really shape tomorrow's world. It will shape how children grow, how they learn, how they interact. And the things with children is they don't remain children, they become adults. They are our future, they are the citizens that will make the decision, that will drive the future. So we really have to think about how we want them to grow. I can picture many words. I can see a world where we have a 15 years old, a bit insecure, having a hard time. And like a lot of teens today, prefers to talk to an AI than a friend, because it's easier. Gone is the stress of starting a conversation with someone new that they don't know. Gone is the stress of not knowing why is my friend not answering my text. Because they have something that will never really be like someone there all the time available for them. But I can also see a world where AI helps that same teen name their feelings, nudges them back to connection, so that they don't miss out on the most transformative period of their brain, adolescence, a time where they learn to interact, a time where they learn to become part of a group, about social norms, and most importantly, a time where they learn to build resilience when they're facing challenges. That's what we neuroscientists call sensitive periods of development, when the brain is primed to learn really fast and where outside of those periods, development is not as great and not as optimal. And it's the same, we can also think about a 9-year-old who learns to think by outsourcing reasoning to machine. Their answers come fast, but remain shallow. Or I can also see a world that where AI would invite to develop their chain of thoughts, to see over angle, to stretch their understanding, and their understanding of the world, but also their understanding of themselves, where reasoning becomes a habit and not a shortcut. And all of the questions we have today are really about trying to decide what world we want to build for them. This framing, this question, really helps us move from pure risk mitigation to beneficial design. And that question demands alignment on what is AI's role in children's life, and also alignment between different expertise, different roles, different industry, to really decide what AI should look like at different developmental stages across different contexts. So I'm happy that we have an amazing panel to help me with this question today. A panel of individuals who have made it their mission to address this important topic by bringing their expertise together to tackle that challenge. So I'm joined with Cécile Attel from the UNICEF, who's the Deputy Director, leading global research. We also have Michael, because it's not only a woman's topic to care about children's future. So you're here for that, Michael. And also because you're the Executive Director of the Jones Gans Cooney Center, where you lead research and innovation within Sesame Workshop to better understand how to shape beneficial future for positive digital products for children. And finally, we have Lauren, who's the representative and head of youth well-being at OpenAI. So I'll start with you, Cécile, because when you think of alignment, we need to find a framework to think of what does it mean to serve children, what does it mean to benefit them, and we already have something that works pretty well, where we have reached a consensus, which is the Children's Rights Convention. So in your opinion, how do you see the CRC's principle translating into requirements for AI systems?
Thank you so much, and great to be here. Very thankful to the Paris Peace Forum and everyone.ai to bring us all together here. We need to discuss these issues because these are not just conceptual. I mean, these are real children engaging on a daily basis with systems that they're exploring, that are offering great opportunities, but that are also still very unknown. Just to give a frame on what we know about engagement of children, in the UK, 2/3 of teenagers are on an almost daily basis using AI. In Argentina, just to take another place where maybe we think we may have a lesser form of engagement, we have almost 40% of children between the age of 9 and 11 using AI. So we know that children and teenagers are very much at the forefront among AI users. But there's a lot that we don't know. We don't know what they do. We don't know whether the content is appropriate or not, whether the content lead them to being in position where they question themselves or are in danger or putting others in danger, or whether they're making the most of the fabulous opportunities that come. So as you were saying, the question is, what is the framework? And the framework, we think, is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is an instrument that has been negotiated by all governments of the world and accepted by all but one state in the world. So we have a very, very strong legal framework that is not only there, but has been accepted by governments around the world in all regions of the world. That convention provides for a number of rights for children, including a lot of protection for children. And those rights and protection are really, we can develop them further, but they really touch upon the rights of children to be protected from the worst possible harm, the right of children to also be provided with the right to education, the right to health, and ultimately also to participate. So just very briefly, protecting, provided with, and participating. On the protection element, it is absolutely crucial that we all of us, whether that's government, international organizations, NGOs, civil societies, and of course the industry, that we keep the protection of children in mind as the forefront issue. And that's especially important that we protect them from the worst possible form of harm that can be caused to their physical integrity, including sexual abuse, but also, of course, emotional and mental well-being. So the protection element has to be first and foremost, and we all have to work collectively on that protection. Two, the provision. Provision is about maximizing the opportunities for children in terms of education, in terms of health. AI can provide so much. And it's not always in the obvious way that we think, for instance, education and technology. It's also about AI being used as a way of better training teachers so that we face the challenging possible gaps between the number of teachers being formed and the number of children that need to be schooled in places, for instance, like among most of the African countries. So there's many different options in which AI can also be used to provide for children. And the last element is the participation. We really are so, cutting ourselves from the fabulous opportunities that children's views and experience could provide in maximizing the opportunities of AI, but also limiting the risks. So we need to have children and teenagers at the table, speak of their own opportunities, of the risks that they see, of their own experience, and participate really and help shape the governance that we need for AI. Thanks.
Thank you, and I think you've articulated how complex the subject is going to be to solve, and I think that's why we need those conversations, and we need many points of view and many opportunities to talk in the future as well. So, Lauren, from industry side, how are you approaching that challenge? And I kind of want to start us also on the positive. What's one action that you've put in place to ensure that AI positively impacts young people's lives?
Great question. Thank you, first and foremost, for having me. As as was mentioned, I lead our product work and am ultimately accountable for youth safety, for minor safety at OpenAI, and I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to continue to have many of these conversations. We're very open and eager for this dialogue. The first thing that I'll underscore more than anything else is there cannot be value for teens on AI products, on OpenAI, on ChatGPT, without safety. Safety underscores everything. We have shared this publicly, we'll say this again, but safety for teens comes before anything else: value, privacy, freedom, et cetera. That is the absolute #1 priority for us on the platform. And as we've similarly shared publicly, there are a number of things we're putting in place here. So we have co-designed with our Wellbeing Council parental controls. We've shared quite unprecedentedly that we notify parents in the event of distressing content among teens. Similarly, unprecedentedly, are sharing that we're building age prediction out in the open, in the wild, that this is not yet live in the product, but this is something we're co-designing with the public, with key stakeholders to ensure we do this and we get this right. In terms of value, this is something that we are, as was mentioned in a roundtable yesterday, something that we want to deeply understand. We all believe and see that there's value for teens on our products. We know they engage with educational content. We know they engage creatively, but we want to understand it, we want to measure it, we want to research it. And so we're similarly partnering with governments around the world and key stakeholders and entities to launch these studies and peer review these studies to understand the actual quantitative value that teens are getting across our products. So there are many consumer features that we have launched on ChatGPT where teens are seeing value. The core product itself, study mode, a teen's ability to learn, but we want to deeply understand quantitatively the value that teens are seeing on the product and underscore all of that none of that can happen without the safety floor, which we've spoken quite a bit about publicly.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. And I kind of want to go back to something you said earlier, Cecile, which, well, Michael is the perfect person to talk about that, but really, when we think about children, we're talking about what we should do for them, how we respect their rights, how we should shape products, how we should shape their futures. And they have to be part of that discussion. They have to be around the table. So, Michael, you work with the CUNY Center. You're really known for including their voices. And I think my question is, what unique insights does it bring when we work with children? And maybe what is something that they see that we often miss as adults?
I'll also just quickly, like my fellow panelists here, thank you so much, Mathilde and the everyone.ai team and the Paris Peace Forum for having me join this event today. It's wonderful to be in the room with all of you. As Mathilde mentioned, I lead a group called the Joan Gans CUNY Center. We're an R&D lab inside Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit that makes Sesame Street. Which may seem like so it may be a question, why am I here on this panel? But our work actually is an extension of the lab, the CUNY Center. We take the child-inspired design practices of Sesame and try to bring them in a useful way out into the broader tech and media universe. You mentioned, child's voices, and Sesame has always been featured children and children's voices in the show, and the way we bring that to tech companies is by practices like co-design, participatory research methods. Lauren mentioned co-design. These are basically ways to bring children into the design process as partners, not merely consulted at various points along the way in a product development cycle. It means that kids have a seat at the table. Their voices are taken seriously. They have a benefit of learning alongside each other and with the adult professionals who are charged with creating a new product. And what that process does is it yields insights that can't really be gotten any other way. A few benefits that I might name. One is we talk about age banding and age determination a lot in technology, and AI, of course, is not an exception. And somewhat, I know in tech it's common to get caught up in age banding as kind of the way you decide what kind of experience a kid will have, but I think it helps complexify the idea of what children are actually like and understand that they come from a wide range of backgrounds, individual differences, content and contexts, and so forth, and that it's an opportunity to design better for those kids by understanding the diversity of their experience and their background. Another, and even more fun than that, is that kids bring ideas to the table that nobody would come up with on their own. And I think anybody who's had an experience of having kids tell them what they think something should be will know that it might be different from what you thought from your own adult conception. You know, they're not, they have a different experience, and we need to honor their ideas. And I think, thirdly, in the AI space, we worry that perhaps what is unique, a unique contribution of children or their unique capacity to learn may be in some way diminished by an automated experience, when in fact we I think everybody on this panel would agree that we hope to enhance and augment and improve kids' experience. And so to ensure that we are constantly centering kids' needs, ideas, interests in a design process is key for us.
Yes, thank you. And I like that we're talking during this conversation on children and AI about some of the benefits, about what we see, about our hopes of what it can bring, because I think we really need to anchor any conversation with that kind of nuance. And at the same time, it wouldn't be responsible to have that conversation without talking about some of the challenges we're facing, some of the tensions. So the first thing I want to do is emphasize how hard this is to do, because we're working with a vulnerable population. We have very limited evidence still. We have no historical background. This technology is quite different from what we've seen. That's the first time we are kind of offloading the cognitive aspect of human. And we're doing this at breakneck speed. So that creates some tensions. And I want to talk honestly about those. So Cecile, at UNICEF, you've guided children through many digital media innovation, from the adoption of TV, the internet, social media. So what practices remain constant, and what is fundamentally different about AI?
Thank you. That's a great question. And yes, there are some constant, but there's also some characteristic of AI that are really very different. And I will mention three that comes to mind. One, you just mentioned breakneck speed, and indeed, it's the extremely fast development, but also the extremely fast adoption. In fact, I mentioned 2/3 of children in the UK using AI. That doubled in 1 year. So it's not only that we've got really a sizable part of children using AI, but it's the fact that it is going even really fast. So the fast adoption, that is, of course, supported by the fact that it's a technology that is built on existing connectivity infrastructure, device uptake. So we have all of the circumstances for really fast and continuously accelerating speed. That's unprecedented. The second aspect is really the generative aspect. With all of the prior technology, we had children engaging with technology, but not in a way that we had the creation of contents and that erosion of some of the cognitive distances that you were mentioning as well, which is absolutely important. And the fact that children can do it in a natural language, and so therefore eroding their understanding of what is the limits between themselves and what is human and what is in fact generated by a machine. And that's really something which we're only starting to fully understand when we combine it with the questions around cognitive development of children and neuroscience. So there's a lot more that we need there. The third element, and probably the most concerning from a child protection viewpoint, is the emotional bond that children seem to be developing really as a result of the first two criteria, and especially the generative nature. And that really is truly unprecedented. I mean, just before the panel, we were joking about how young children can feel, a lot of emotional bonds with Sesame characters, but that's not the same way, because it's mediated by the fact that when they watch TV or they're on social media, there is still a physical distance that does not necessarily exist, and the fact that a lot of the conversations are mediated by the fact that there are parents and families or teachers around. What we are starting to see, and what is concerning again for children, is that emotional bond is very much one-on-one. It's the child with the AI, with no mediation and no one around to mitigate that. That's highly unprecedented and something that we need to look into. Now, turning to maybe an area where we see both constant and changes, it's education. I mean, obviously, the prior technologies even television have a loud leap in understanding education. Again, taking Sesame Street, sorry, just giving you a lot of thumbs up there. We've seen how television improved education. Radio programs democratized the capacity to have educative programs being widespread. But it was always something which came from within and where there was a control on what was generated and handed over to children. What is absolutely different now is that we have a machine generating different contents and adjusting it. Again, that can be potentially fantastic in terms of individualizing the content to meet the individual needs of the child. But are we ready to do that without a lot of safeguards and understanding of what is generated, under which criteria? There's a lot of questions that we have. So that's where there is both a constant, but also, again, something very different and potentially very dangerous if it is not sufficiently research regulated and where we don't have very clear understanding of what are the criteria that should apply. What stays the same, I could mention many different things, but I would say two things. One is the importance of the responsibilities of anyone being involved, and first and foremost, the industries and the designers, having the responsibility to not unleash something and test it with children without the sufficient understanding of what can be the aspects. So that, fundamental safety by design and not even starting to experiment with a potential Frankenstein without understanding the consequences, that's absolutely one constant that was there with prior technologies and must absolutely continue with this technology as well. The second aspect is that we need to be thinking much more holistically. And it's complex with a technology that is so complex and so embracing. But we need to be thinking not only of the relationship between the child and AI, not put all of the responsibility on parents that may not be sufficiently equipped to technologically and in terms of values, but to really just be thinking of the child within concentric circles that protect the child. That include the family, teachers, but also, of course, governments. So we need to think of the governance of AI to protect children and maximize the opportunities within all of those various centers. So not only thinking, are parents able to control, but are law enforcement officers capacitated to deal with issues when there's an AI-generated sexual avatars of a child being created? We need to really take that approach, and we need to take it now.
Yes, thank you, Cecilia. And as we've mentioned, safety has to be put first before we can do anything else. And yet, children are getting online. They are using the tools. Now we have millions of teens around the world that use ChatGPT, and they do use it for everything. They use it for homework. Some have very creative way of using it for tutoring. Some using for entertainment in ways that feel safe. And some use it for emotional support, sometimes in very sensitive context. So, Lauren, you're having to make very complex decisions every day. Well, how are you doing first? And next, how are you addressing those?
How am I doing? Well, I'll begin. When we were talking about Sesame in advance, I shared I have 3 kids under the age of 6. So first, how am I doing is I don't sleep a lot for that reason. We spend a lot of time with Sesame Street, I'll say. But what you emphasized is exactly right. These are complex systems that are global. And so when we make decisions, we have to think about how we make decisions for teens across the globe, not with a US center, not with a European center, not with any particular country in mind. We think about the development, what is developmentally appropriate for teens, that is globally aligned in terms of what is developmentally appropriate, that is experts that are guiding us in these decisions, and we think about it holistically. So when we think about safety, the solutions that we deploy, age assurance, all of these complex questions that underscore safety and underscore value, we think about this from a global lens and not one particular geography. there are incredible equities to weigh, to your point. This creates a lot of safety and value and cognitive value for teens around the globe that do not have support, that do not have law enforcement to come to their aid, or do not have appropriate safeguards. And in other geographies where there are, we want to make sure that the appropriate bodies and parents and teachers and principals and administrators all have the right controls and access such that it is utilized in a safe and an appropriate way. So the question that you're asking around difficult decisions is exactly right. We don't have all the answers. I don't think any of us has all the answers. And we want to learn and collaborate and do this in a way that will create incredible benefit and value for teens. But again, to your point, with safety at the underpinning.
Yes, thank you. And I think maybe, Michael, I'll come back to you. You might have some lessons to share with us because you've been pretty much an example at Sesame Workshop of really finding the balance and also adapting to the world, because videos are getting shorter, they're getting overstimulating, they're very fast-paced, and that's how you create engagement. That's exciting. And that's not always in children's best interest. It's not always adapted to their age. And it often devalues the quality. So how are you finding that balance in the digital media space of, well, kind of keeping up with the pace of how things are going while still really remaining true to your core values of educational high-quality content?
Such a good question. I mean, it's kind of quaint to think about an hour-long TV program that kids watched every day. Everyone was watching the same show, and a show actually came to an end, and you moved on to other things, right? In today's kind of always-on media experience, where one online video will queue up another one that might be in the same, line of interest of the child, is just a different way of thinking, and Sesame has always been designed as Sesame Street, that is, as a prompt for the kind of thinking that might happen when the television is turned off. That was in the original design framework that led to the creation of the show. It was something we've closely guarded and tried to preserve within how the show works. But the show has a curriculum with learning goals, and they're articulated through the entertaining content that happens there. What does that mean in a world where children have a whole lot of choice, or where what happens next is automatically queued up for them? It's a good challenge for us. Does it spark reflection or thinking about a new thing or imagination or what to do next when they complete a media experience? Another aspect of this too is the sort of singular one to child to device kind of experience, as opposed to what used to be a more social experience of experiencing media. And another goal of the show was to spark what we know from research is the enhancement to learning that happens between a child and a caring an adult. And so if there's not equal awareness of what the child is experiencing in a media experience, then it may not be amplified, it may not have the same effect or even the same guardrails if the adult's not engaged and able to support. And so that's a design challenge for all of us. How can we support more shared engagement and also what happens next? A third thing I think about is this idea of learning as being an effect of some kind of constructive friction that happens when your ideas are challenged, or when you're prompted to think for yourself or use your imagination, as opposed to having a media experience that perhaps just tees up something else to kind of consider passively. And so we know that a lot of engagement happens because the next experience just happens, or a question is asked of the child, like what else could we be doing together? And of course that's very enticing, but it's also an opportunity for designers to think about what could be something that really is in the kids' best interest.
Thank you, Michael. And that's a perfect transition for the next part, where I really want to talk specifically about that design, because the design choices ultimately is what children interact with. That's what shapes their experience. And I was really looking forward to hearing your answer, so I'm realizing I never even introduced myself. So I think it's the right moment to do it now. I'm the chief scientist at everyone.ai and at the iRAISE coalition. And so within the coalition, we are lucky to bring together and to have so much traction and motivation from all stakeholders. We have now 12 governments working with us. We have industry, such as OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Anthropic, Hugging Face that are part of this coalition. We are supporting with many organizations and NGOs, such as the CUNY Center. We are really starting to include youth voices a lot more than we've had in the past, and I think that's something I'm really looking forward to contribute both with UNICEF and the CUNY Center, because you have the expertise to do that, and I think we really have to rely on each other's expertise to go faster, to build this conversation. And finally, we have researchers such as me and a lot of others. And that's what we are trying to do is, okay, like we have something to tackle, we have to tackle it fast. So what we first need to do is to go from the beginning, from the products that are coming out. So that's why we want to work with industry. That's where we can make the biggest changes. And as we said, like we don't have all of the answers, so we need researchers to start using the data they have, and when they don't, to make their best guesses with what we have available, because, well, we don't have a choice. Decisions are going to be made. So if we want decisions to go in a way that respects children, we have to do with what we currently have. And I'm so excited to say and to share that 2 weeks ago, we held in Silicon Valley our first iRAISE lab. When we talked about that concept 6 months ago, it really sounded nuts. We should put all the industries around the same table, and then we should put researchers, and then they should talk, and then they should figure out what do we do with that. And that just happened. We had the subject we wanted to tackle, because that was what industry were highlighting, just as you said as well, Cecile, was that emotional over-reliance that we see happening more and more between adolescents and AI. And what was if I have to give one conclusion, is that yes, design matters, because the more an AI sounds human and feels human, the more anthropomorphic it is, the more it creates the room for that emotional reliance. So we have to think about design for younger kids, for adolescents in a different way. We have a responsibility to shape experiences that are responsible and beneficial for them. And that might mean having to really work on anthropomorphic cues. How does the language talk? How does the language create or not a relationship with the users? And we have to work with researchers to really understand what's optimal, what is the right level, the range that we can go through, how much a language acts human, and also figure out what's unacceptable, what we can't see, things like, I will always be there for you, I'm the only one for you. Those things we can't afford to see, because adolescents are going to be prime and wanting those type of interaction, because that's really what their brain is wired to do at that age. So one of those challenges we still have, and that we heard a lot about from companies, Lorraine, within the lab, is the speed mismatch between research and the technology. AI develops quickly, but developmental research takes forever. And for good reason as well, because some of the impacts we won't see for a long time. So how can we, as researchers, as independent research centers, NGOs, support you and guide companies in a way that matches that innovation?
It's a good question. And everything you emphasized is exactly right. This is happening very fast. Adoption is very fast. But it doesn't change the ultimate goal, which is to do this in the safest, most responsible way we can with the information we have. And so events like the one we had 2 weeks ago, where product builders, designers, researchers can be in a room together and ask the questions and understand the research that exists as we make decisions, is the fastest path forward and also the most responsible path forward. And we couldn't love that more. You and I have talked about this personally many times, which is to say, as much of that as we can get with as many global voices as we can is something that we want more of. We're doing it as much internally as we can, but we would love as much of it externally as we can. It's one of the reasons why we've partnered so closely with everyone.ai. We've developed our own council of experts, social scientists, et cetera. As much information as we can get along with our own production data to make these informed decisions will help us as this technology moves incredibly quickly. So the answer is more. more time together, more of these conversations where we can share the questions we have and research can share the answers that it's finding would be incredibly useful as we build this product together.
Yes, thank you. And I really want to highlight how inspiring that room was 2 weeks ago. It was very intense today, and it was really buzzing with a lot of ideas and a lot more alignment than anyone was anticipating. Because ultimately, I think when we talk about children, we all understand our responsibility to do it as right as we can. Michael, during the lab, there was a lot of different expertise, industry, and NGOs co-designing together. How can your organization engage further, and how do we translate those experts' consensus in ways that can be put into frameworks, into products, but also that can face the general public, where we can also translate some of these? How creative can we be there?
This is our favorite place to be, which is at the center of this kind of triangulation of product policy guidance and research and kids. And I think already we have wonderful guidance from UNICEF through their policy guidance on AI for children. We have
iRAISE work on a design code. We're also involved in a project called RITEC, the Responsible Innovation in Technology for Children. That is a collaboration between UNICEF and the LEGO Group, and we're a partner that supports implementation. And I think of our work as what I like to call last mile translational science, where lots of good ideas exist, but there's a gap between what's known from the evidence base and recommended practice and what's actually taken up by companies, because you have brilliant people working in companies who have the same hopes and dreams that we do for this work, but it's hard, and so it takes a lot of effort to compel your colleagues internally to come to the table to think about these ideas and to have practical ways of doing it. And so, for example, we have a fellowship called the Wellbeing by Design Fellowship, where we take on a cohort of 10 designers who are currently working on a product that will be used by kids, and they get to decide how they can shape that product around existing design frameworks that we tee up for them and support over the course of several months, and then they can show their work at the end. So they've had a supported experience where they can conceptualize the outcome they want, workshop it with children, with other professionals, with expert guidance, and then show their work, and we can generate case studies. So already, just being able to show that this is possible and that people in big and small companies, for-profit and nonprofit, can do it is, I think, very helpful. We also have a product incubator called the Sandbox, where we do early stage ideation on a new product, where we bring kids into the room, which is obviously key for their perspectives and insights, but also the kind of the same frameworks that we've been talking about here as well, so that they can, if they were not already familiar with that work, they can learn about it, and then together we can get somewhere further and serve more kids and serve them in more enjoyable ways. So I think we need more models where we just specifically address that gap, and we'll actually reap the benefits of all this hard work by a cross-sector community on frameworks.
Yeah, all those initiatives sounds like so much fun on the everyday to be part of.
It is fun every day.
And you get to work with Elmo. I'm so jealous. I want my picture with Elmo. Okay, Cécile, there is not only a speed mismatch between AI development and research, but there's also an inner evidence gap. So why does this matter, and what can we do about it?
We need to really address that gap as much as possible, because indeed, I mean, as Lauren pointed out, we need to be able to inform what are extremely rapid development. And also for UNICEF as an international organization, we need to inform governments, and governments have to be taking their responsibility in regulating as well, based on the existing research, because the industry has to really, and rightly wants to forge ahead. But yet we really need to have the safeguards that are evidence-informed as well, to, when needed, slow down that progress to ensure that children are protected. So that's also another triangulation that is needed. To do that, we need more research, but we need also more understanding of how we have huge differences among children. As was pointed out, we need that global picture, and we try, and as UNICEF, we conduct our research certainly very globally. But even within that each societies, there are very different pockets and very different understandings. So we need to have an age-informed understanding, a gender-informed understanding. I mean, we obviously cannot look at the need for protection of a teenager girls in Afghanistan the same way that we will be looking at the protection needs of, an older teenager boy in France. So we absolutely need to also have that clear understanding in terms of needs and needs for protections and needs for usage as well. We also need to bear in mind the fact that we still have very large swathes of the world where children do not have access to connectivity, so leave alone access to technologies such as AI. That need for differentiation has to really be very much at the source of any of the research that we conduct. I also think that I want to come back to the question of participation. We need to have children and young people, but especially children and teenagers involved. In fact, in some of the research, so at UNICEF, we've been conducting those research for obviously a really long time. So I could mention on some of the disrupting harm research that we've been leading with, over 1,200,000 children aged 12 to 17 for now really several years. But we are trying to focus our research now much more also on AI and the use of AI. And just very recently, we've conducted research in 7 countries, including India, Brazil, Sierra Leone, and Uganda. And we really found that children have very informed views on the potential and risks of AI. So I'll just give you, I think I cited some of these yesterday in the roundtable. So I'm going to give you other citation. One is an Indian teenager that was in the group 14 to 17 who said, "We soon will have more online friends than physical ones, and AI will become our friend." And so really the question of friendships and bond, and again, back to that emotional bond. Again, a teenager in Spain, that same age group, 14 to 17, saying AI is replacing thought and analysis. And that's something that we've heard over and over again. I mentioned yesterday, in Brazil, in Sierra Leone, in fact, children referring themselves to what they say as a very scary risk for their own thought process. And now speaking as a parent of a teenager, I hear that all the time as well. The question of course, we can go the easy way and throw our homework in a system that is going to generate something, but how much then will I have learned? And that's in addition to concerns among that generation for what is the future of work? Will I get an opportunity of getting a job when I come out of college? I mean, that anxiety, we speak a lot of eco-anxiety. I'm starting to wonder whether we should not speak of AI anxiety among teenagers and young people. So these are real concerns that need to also address not only our gap in terms of understanding, but even the way we conduct research to really be participatory. There's also the very important question of children understanding when they face AI. So we are advocating as UNICEF to really have almost a sort of a red flag, the fact that when you take a pack of cigarettes, you've got a red flag that says this is dangerous for your health, so that when through a social media you get connected to AI, you have a warning that says, hey, now this is AI. We need to really make sure that children, teenagers and their parents and communities are aware so that we don't erode the distance between what is AI, what is not AI, but also to ensure that we address very quickly the question of emotional bond and even the understanding of confidentiality. As I mentioned already yesterday, in Sierra Leone, we had a child between the age of 10 and 13, so early teenager, in Sierra Leone, that said, when you are using ChatGPT, you can tell it confidential information and it won't tell anyone at all. Obviously, a fundamental misunderstanding of how confidential that relationship is. These are huge legal and ethical issues that we need to address through research, but also through action as quickly as possible.
And I think your examples really illustrates 2 very interesting things, that on some aspects, children are so aware of the risk, sometimes more than adults are, and on others, they are actually more oblivious. And that's why we need this conversation, because we also need to understand what is their view and where they're coming from. Now I'm very aware of the time, and I promised we would finish on time each. So you really have like 30 seconds to answer that last question to close this off. So I want to finish where we began. What does AI owe children? And I think the answer is emerging from this conversation. We need collaborative, collective thinking. So if you had one sentence to say what would success look like for this collaboration and what becomes possible when we work together? Who first?
AI owes children a safe and a beneficial experience, both together and in that order. And we'll get there by continuing to collaborate, continuing to have dialogue, continuing to point out gaps across the board, and continuing to solve them together.
I would say AI owes children our shared commitment. I think we heard today how no single organization or sector can solve this. We really all need to be at the table together with a shared commitment for children. We are the caring adults, and we need their participation to get to the right place together.
First, I really endorse the 2 points, which shows the importance of dialogue. And I would add that that 2 things, maybe child rights provides already the answer, to be seeking to not only minimize, but ensure that there's no harm caused to children by any technology, including AI, and 2, enable that optimization of the rights of children, including to education, to play. But I will also add that in the equation, government also have their responsibility, and they cannot abdicate their responsibility. So we need to absolutely all work together to ensure that we've got a child rights agenda for AI.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your expertise, your commitment, and for bringing your passion. And I will get in trouble if I do not finish by a good call to action. So if you're not already part of the coalition and you think you need to bring your chair to the table to have this conversation, please join us. Please reach out. Thank you.